Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
I think most of you know me, but I'm Peggy Glover, president of Norfolk Audubon Society. And we're really pleased to have Susan Harder give a presentation tonight. Susan's the New York State representative of the International Dark Sky Association. And she has consulted with all the local planning departments on the East End and also helped write the outdoor lighting legislation for the Suffolk County towns, all the townships, the county, and New York State. Before we get started, I just want to briefly go over some upcoming programs in March. We have our Friday Morning Birders tomorrow morning with Ben Bolduck at Orient Beach State Park. So if you're interested, it's not too late. That starts at 8 a.m. And then we have our Young Birders Club on Friday, March 10th. And by the way, all these are on our website, norfolkaudubon.org, so you can just go on the website for the details and sign up. And then on Thursday, March 16th, we have Amy Weldon. She's going to do a program on the salt marsh sparrow and a joint venture with she's the coordinator of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And yeah, that's going to be great. And then we have Tuesdays with Tom on March 21st. That's always the third Tuesday of the month. So we can go ahead. Susan, I'm going to hand it over.
Well, thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you all. I have worked with Audubon in the city on some legislation for the city, and I'm working with some animal groups, also on some city legislation. It seems to be coming along. Locally, I have worked with your planning director, Heather Lanza, for new commercial site arrangements. And, but, you know, I'm always learning new things. I'm a retired art dealer. I moved to East Hampton about 25 years ago, and I've been involved in the issue of dark sky for about 20 years. I'm also on the board of the Hamptons Observatory. You have Custer Observatory up there on the North Fork. I took a lighting design class so that I could understand, you know, better how to implement outdoor lighting. And I've got a website, the Dark Sky Society, which has some handouts, you know, in case you've got a neighbor with a bad light or want to have some information about landscape lighting. I've got some nice handouts. So you all are probably familiar with this map. It shows the lighting that's actually being measured by the satellites. So they're able to determine how much lighting is going up into the night sky. And it's generally indication of the population centers. But this is less indicative as it used to be, because as communities become more aware of using light more sensibly, it's no longer an indication of the population. And you can see in Japan how overlit it is. It's a cultural phenomenon. They generally have a great deal of lighting. I've been involved in this for a long time. This is me sitting in my 6th floor window in Manhattan, being lit up. I could read the newspaper sitting in my window seat. And this is how I got involved out here. These are my neighbors' floodlights who are aimed at my house. And I was telling Peggy I have a glass house, so my neighbors' lights were intruding on my space. And I came to realize that our lighting law was inadequate. So I learned everything I could about outdoor lighting and worked with the town to enact our dark sky laws. Light pollution is not all lighting. It's only that which is misdirected, unshielded, excessive, or unnecessary. And you can see it. It's manifested as glare, sky glow, and of course the air pollution from the excess energy. The effects of light pollution are many, and more is being discovered all the time. Our human health is disrupted. And in fact, light at night, LAN, is actually classified as a carcinogen. It has such a dramatic effect on our hormones. There's a greater incidence of breast cancer in women who sleep with a light on. because it suppresses our melatonin, and melatonin is a tumor suppressant. And of course, if it's disrupting humans, it's disrupting, flora and fauna. And the glare from unshielded fixtures, makes it difficult to see at night. But we also can't see the stars when light is being emitted, reflected, or directed upward, and it hits particulate, causing sky glow. And of course, we've got wasted natural resources by using energy when we don't need to. So this is a diagram of, what we're trying to avoid, which is the uplighting and the light trespass. Here's a real life example here in East Hampton. On the left, we have an unshielded fixture, a partially shielded fixture, and what we refer to as fully shielded. And that would be lighting where all the light is directed towards the ground. This is all too common. We've got big floodlights mounted way on top of a building, aimed straight out. This is all too common. And this is the house across the street being all lit up. And this is we're seeing more and more of this, where you've got what they refer to as architectural lighting, where buildings are lit up like sculpture. And this is an impressive estimate from the Department of Energy, that 99% of our outdoor lighting is not serving a useful purpose. If you just drive around at night, the vast majority of lights, there's no reason for it. And we have fabulous controls now and sensors, and we have ways and means. And in Europe, this entire highway is all lit up. There's no cars, there's no nothing. Cars have headlights. But in Europe, they actually have motion sensor activated street lights. And here, of course, this is the sky glow, obscuring the stars. This is what our night sky should look like. And only less than a third of the people in this country can even see the Milky Way, and we're losing it, all the time. The main organization that's been involved in outdoor lighting, research, dissemination of information is the International Dark Sky Association. And they started in Tucson, Arizona, where they have astronomical observatories up in the mountains. And the astronomers worked with the city fathers, and they enacted the first dark sky laws, and that was about 40 years ago. And, this is what you would see with and without light pollution of a comet. This is during a blackout, before and after. This is a map of eastern Long Island. You can see we still are relatively dark. The city's encroaching on us. I'm sure you're aware of that. And something we have to keep in mind always is that every creature on Earth has evolved in a day-night cycle. And we're losing that night cycle because of all the extra lighting that we have. And this has a dramatic effect on every creature. These are two of the brochures that have been produced by the International Dark Sky Association, and they are extremely well written. They just published these. There's two on health, there's one on wildlife. This one's on outdoor lighting and crime and wasting energy. And this is how it's written. But they discuss the birds and frogs and coral and turtles. But it's really well written. I highly recommend getting in touch with them and having them send you these brochures. They're very, very well written. I was very impressed with them. This was an impressive collaboration of the International Dark Sky Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society. And we have basically, in the past, been at odds with each other because the Illuminating Engineering people are made up of the manufacturers. But they came together and we formed these 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting. It should have a clear purpose. It should be directed only where it's needed. It should be no brighter than is necessary. It should be used only when it is useful, and use the warmer colors rather than that bluish LEDs. I want to explain more about that. So when you're in any lighting design, you try to minimize the glare, the light trespass, the uplight, overlighting, and just the general energy waste. something that we need to keep in mind, which is architects, engineers, and electricians do not study lighting. They study electrical and construction and infrastructure, but lighting designers is the only discipline that actually studies the effects of light, how much you use it, and the different photometrics attached to different fixtures. And so we employ what we call dark sky lighting. And it's based in common sense. Again, using the shielded fixtures, I'll show you some examples. You do not need to exceed light levels, which would be measured in foot candles on the ground. And primarily just using it when you need it for safety and for property identification. And mounting it at the correct height. If you've got it too high and too close to the property line, you're going to have light trespass. We really have to reduce the amount of blue in the light source, because you've noticed some of these, headlights and some of these LEDs are very, very blue. It's very detrimental to our eyesight, to the night sky. There's a lot of implications. And just to power up a 100-watt incandescent light fixture all night burns a quarter ton of coal, because most electricity is still generated by burning fossil fuel. These are some more statistics, and I'm sure these are old, actually. I should probably update this. But, there's billions of dollars wasted on outdoor lighting. And of course, the air pollution. And we're subject to the air pollution that's a result of burning all this coal in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, because the winds come in this direction and poisons our water and our land. There's a lot of myths about lighting. They think brighter is better. It actually makes it harder to see when it's too bright, because you're not able to readapt. It's like you're coming out of a movie theater, and it feels too bright. You can't see as well because your pupil closes down. Also, security lighting, that's a misnomer. When you leave all the lights on, you might feel safe, when you leave, but it doesn't make your property safer. In fact, it makes it easier for, vandals or robbers to see where they're going. Most crime is committed during the daytime anyway. You can't even see it, but over on the left-hand side, there's a railroad sign that's obscured by that glare. And like I said, with the adaptation, we can see in very bright, and we can also see, in very dim moonlight. Moonlight is 0.01 foot candles. And if you've ever walked around in the moonlight, you can actually see where you're going. When you've got an interior room, the light bounces all around and becomes very even. But outdoors, the light is not hitting anything, and it can be seen at great distances. It also seems brighter. Your eye is always going to go towards the brightest light source. It's just an autonomic response. This is a old-fashioned LIPA utility pole. We worked with then Chairman Richie Kessel, and they developed a full shielded fixture, which they have installed on their own facilities and made it available. This is the light pattern. And distracting glare is something that's been underappreciated. A car, if you've got a glare off to the side and you're driving, your eye is going to go in that direction, and you're not looking forward where your car is going. And then also, we all live close to water, and the glare that's coming off of shoreline interferes with navigation, interferes with the lights. And, they have attributed some accidents to some of the glare coming off of these shore lights. Then there's light trespass, such as light that's entering your house from another property. And something to keep in mind, not just for humans, but, all creatures and our birds, that they go through a certain rhythm during the night, And our hormones change, over time. And there's really quite a lot of activity at night. And this is an area that's been very impactful, discussing the effect of light at night on our human health. The evidence is accumulating that light at night and the consequent decrease in melatonin may be a major driver of breast cancer. It's being studied as a way to prevent and treat breast cancer and other cancers. And it's even just a very small amount is being shown. So it's also impactful on prostate cancer. So back in 2002, they did the very first collection of studies about light at night, the ecological consequences. Now, there was a bias towards studying creatures during the day. And I'm sure you all are aware, since you're bird people, that birds migrate at night. And most creatures are nocturnal. So there's the fact that this was the very first time that they studied behavior of animals, the impact on night lighting was really quite dramatic. So every single creature that they studied was impacted. This was the poster that they had for that conference. And it was every single creature was very dramatically, and it would be their foraging, it would be migrating. The light at night disrupted every single aspect of every creature that they studied. I'm not going to go through every one, but bats, sea turtles, frogs, salamanders, snakes, moths, fish, songbirds have been very well documented, the impact of lighting. Zooplankton doesn't come up from and eat algae at night when the surface of the water is lit. And trees are impacted because they don't go into dormancy when they are supposed to, and they suffer dieback. This is a diagram showing how turtles would gravitate towards light on shore rather than emerging from their eggs and going towards the water. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has a law in Florida, and they require lighting to avoid the beaches during the turtle hatching season. So the conclusion of that ecological study was all of the things we do for nature preservation are necessary, but they might not be sufficient if we don't address light pollution. It really was very dramatic. So, and I read new studies all the time coming out. They're talking about how the firefly population is being decimated because they have to communicate with each other through their bioluminescence. And they can't find their mates when areas are overlit or when new lighting is introduced to their environment. And of course, the birds eat the bugs. And if our bugs are being disrupted, then the birds are going to be disruptive. And this is a fascinating poster. It's referred to as National Bird Migration Day. But as you can see, there's stars. And this is at nighttime. They migrate at night, primarily, from what I understand, to conserve energy so that they don't overheat during the daytime. Also, it's been discovered that they navigate by the stars. In Toronto, a group called FLAP, Fatal Light Awareness, collected all the songbirds that were hitting the lit buildings. And they've collected them here. You can see several of every bird type. Also, the birds will, in a foggy area around a tower, the birds will circle endlessly a lit tower to exhaustion. And it happened in Bridgehampton. They couldn't figure out why all these birds had died, and next to this Long Island Power Authority tower that was lit up, and it had been foggy that night. They sent the birds up for autopsy, and they had just simply exhausted themselves and died. So these are buildings that are, have all that external lighting on them. And some of the cities, Chicago, New York, Toronto, are starting to shut off their lights during migration, the outdoor, the external ones. And the September 11th tribute, the director of the Audubon Society in the city has his finger on the button. And if he sees the birds, they're on a radar. If he sees the birds going towards these lit towers, he has the ability to shut the lighting off, because they get caught up in these cleat lights. And this is an example of a tree that's hanging onto its leaves on the side that's lit up by the street light. So this is not good for the tree. So this is a poor lighting design for trees. This one's slightly better. And of course, sign lighting, it's better if it's top mounted. This is a bottom, you couldn't read this sign because of the glare until they put the light up on top. And that's a law actually in East Hampton. They also have flagpole lighting that's downlight. So you put it on top of the pole. Something that we have to remember, electric light is considered a modern phenomenon, and it's changing all the time. Light sources are false light. In the middle top, that's daylight. It's equal measure of all colors. But light bulbs have different proportions of colors. And LEDs and metal halide have very high percentage of blue light. And blue light is very deleterious because, for one thing, they consider it a contributor to macular degeneration, the high blue. And that's why, you're getting more and more blue filters on your iPads and iPhones. And I have blue light blocking filters on my television. So this is what an LED looks like. It's very high in blue. But now the manufacturers, God bless them, have started to develop LEDs that are very low in Kelvin. If you look on the package, the 2700 is lower. They're now starting to offer 2200. I bought some at IKEA. But the lower the Kelvin, the less blue light is in the fixture, is in the bulb. Because we know how you can't see as well, when you pass cars with these bluish headlights. That's because your pupil closes down tighter in the presence of blue light. And when you pass, you're not seeing as well because you're not getting as much light. And because the blue light waves are very short, and they scatter more in the atmosphere. So the more blue in a light source, the more sky glow you get. That's why our sky is blue during the day. The sky is black, but because the blue light waves scatter more, it turns our sky blue. So a lot of the street lights are being converted from sodium, high pressure sodium, over to LEDs. And I think on the North Fork, they were switched over some time ago, but at that time, they didn't have this very low Kelvin, low blue light available, but now they do. So it's pretty simple and cost effective. Dealing with air and water pollution can be very expensive, but dealing with light pollution, you actually end up saving money. You get a return on your investment. You change the fixtures, you change the bulbs, you put in a sensor, you add a timer. There's a lot of ways to address light pollution. These are diagrams that are oftentimes attached to building permits. On the one side are the unshielded fixtures, where you see the bulb. So of course you're going to see the glare. And on the other side are what we refer to as fully shielded. All the lights directed towards the ground. And they're able to do this because of all these reflecting surfaces. They can direct the light in different patterns. There's an example of a fully shielded fixture. That's our goal. The International Dark Sky Association has a wonderful reference page. If you're looking for light fixtures, you can go there, and they have pedestrians, utilities, facade, sign lighting. They have all these different, and they have a program. It's called Seal of Approval. So the manufacturer sends their example to International Dark Sky Association, and they evaluate it, and they put it on their page. Like I said, the Illuminating Engineering Society is made up of the lighting manufacturers, and they have produced a set of instructions about light levels, how much light you need in order to see for various uses, parking lots, walkways, doorways, etc. And we really just don't need to exceed those. Something I recommend for people who go back to the city is to have a couple of interior lights on that are on independent timers that makes it appear that you're there. Because if you're worried about security, leaving all your exterior lights on does not make your house more secure. A couple of interior lights that are independently on timers. We're lucky that the manufacturers, are catching on, and they are developing better fixtures. This is an ad for a streetlight company. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how we wonder where you are. But they still have equal number of, unshielded fixtures, but they are introducing better fixtures. One of the problems is that, we have these old-fashioned fixtures, and the lighting gets brighter and brighter and brighter. These types of fixtures were initially designed for flame light sources, and now we put, bulbs in them that are, 1,000 times brighter. And we do measure light in lumens. That's the amount of light leaving the light bulb, which you could read on the packages. So we can't really just ask for watts anymore. We used to say, give me a 60-watt bulb. We have to look at the lumens and convert them. This is a fixture that was designed recently. Lots of times people are selecting lights based on what they look like during the day, not based on what they look like when they're lit. So we end up with a lot of glare. This is another example. But they do have shielded fixtures now. This is the Via Appia in Italy. These are both fully shielded, fixtures. They also have fully shielded fixtures in front of Buckingham Palace. On the left is an unshielded post top. On the right is a shielded one. These are a couple of examples. So just to show you, there's lots of choices. These are little landscape lights. These are the old-fashioned wall pack. They've been redesigned. So I just, try to make the point that there's no such thing as really security lighting. It's mostly, I refer to it as insecurity lighting. Feeling safe is different than being safe. The Department of Justice evaluated the relationship between lighting and crime, and they concluded that there's a strong indication that increased lighting only decreases the fear of crime, not actual crime. And they asked some thieves that were jailed, what would deter you? Dog is at the top of the list. Alarm system. Somebody at home. That was important. The appearance of being at home. And so-called security lighting wasn't even mentioned. If any decision is taken to increase lighting, it needs to be taken on the best possible evidence. British Journal. So what we need to do is just use our common sense. It is a bit counterintuitive, I will give you that. But don't you think your neighbors, if you routinely kept your lights off and somebody was walking around on your property with a flashlight, I think your neighbors would be more inclined to, give the police a call. And there's lots of schools that now shut their lights off, not just to save energy, but it had a resulting decrease in vandalism and loitering. My own school shuts their lights off. I helped design their lighting, and I convinced them that was a good idea. So we can also have prisons with good lighting. These are shielded light fixtures at a prison. ATMs do not need to have bad lighting. There is an ATM state law that requires a certain amount of lighting, but they can still use shielded light fixtures and keep the light on the property. They're not doing it there. This is just a statistic from a school district in Texas. The vandalism dropped dramatically. And this is from an alley study, not to get too in the weeds with this, but after they installed more lighting, they got more crime. Oh, I love this one. This is a comparison of two gas stations. Before they had 6,400 watts and they had a lot of glare. And then they lowered it to 3,500 and it was much more pleasant. And when they compared a gas station with high glare versus non-glare, they actually sold more gas at the no glare. So just to review, the causes of light pollution would be unshielded and excessive light fixtures, having light levels way beyond those illuminating engineering recommendations, and having, redundant lighting is a big deal. I actually was in the supervisor at Southold. I was in his office once, and I pointed out to him he had two street lights of different types right outside his window. I said, don't you think maybe you could turn off one of those? And then also, fixtures are oftentimes just misaimed. An electrician will put in a light fixture, aim it straight out, and, leave. So sometimes they just need to be rearranged. And sensors and dimmers, are so sophisticated now. I mean, you can operate your own lighting even from your cell phone. So like I said, we're going to get sky glow, from upwardly directed lights. We're going to have glare. We're going to have light trespass. We're going to waste energy. And the ecological disturbances are just monumental. And like I said, they're just now starting to study more of the effects of night lighting on creatures. Fish, having lit waterways out west, they realized that the fish weren't migrating as they should to their spawning beds because the water was all lit up, and they know to avoid predation during daylight. So it completely changed the patterns of fish migrating. And our human health, it's really important to sleep in the dark. If you need to have a night light, apparently if you use a red colored bulb, it does not shut off the melatonin. So you simply make an adjustment. Use I have a red light by my bed. If I have to get up in the middle of the night, I just turn on my little red light. And, something that we can't really evaluate or quantify, but losing our connection to our view of the stars in the sky, I think we shouldn't discount that. I think that there's an element of wonder and our place in the universe, and spiritually, it's something that we need to factor into anything where we're considering night lighting. So the way to deal with it is primarily education. It's people, most people get this because, like I said, it's based in common sense. It's great to have examples to point to. This is a good example. This is a bad example. Policies, guidelines, and regulations have to be initiated on a municipal level and locally. It has to be done on a local level. I'd love to have a national, light pollution law, but I think we're a long way from that. But locally, politicians are willing to do it, and of both parties. I mean, I've had laws passed by Republicans as well as Democrats. Enforcement, it requires citizen involvement because, that's the way to motivate your enforcement procedures. So this is what our night sky would look like, and where it will, if we keep working on this issue. And these are the two websites where there's information. And I'm happy to take some questions. If you want to field them to Peggy, Peggy can let me know if you had questions.
Yes, I apologize. I forgot to tell people to feel free to put questions in the chat room, and I don't see any questions in the chat room right now. But I have a question. What can we do as individuals to work on?
Well, I think what we can do is, first of all, we look in our own backyards. I think that's the thing that we can do. And I think it's important to question, for the most part, most lighting that is existing, and that's been in existence for, 10, 15, 20 years, there was very little design work that went into it. Lots of times they would just grab something out of a truck, and there were not many good choices, 10 or 15 years ago. So question, there's a reason this doesn't look right, because it's not. And I think that we need to support and get into discussions with our elected officials, because they know about these problems and they're willing to, you'd be surprised, they're very willing to do something. I went and met with Bridget Fleming, our local Suffolk County legislator. I had a nice meeting with her, and I explained to her about the blue light problem. And she turned around and she wrote, and they enacted a limit on the Kelvin for Suffolk County facilities. So you'd be surprised, it can shock you in a good way to get involved and to let people do truly care about the birds. And they don't, we don't need to harm them any more than we already have. So nightlight, pointing out to them that birds migrate at night. They migrate at, they're not way up in the sky, they're on low levels. And our lighting impacts them in ways that I think we're just now, finding out. We know that they crash into lit buildings. We know that they avoid nesting in lit trees. We know that their insects that they feed on are decimated by night lighting. We know that they're going to crash into lit buildings. So being careful with night lighting is going to be very important. But I do think engaging, you have a wonderful planning director, Heather Lanza, and if they ever propose amendments to your lighting code, or if you all want to propose lighting regulations of sorts, meeting with her and talking to your elected officials are very important, because I'm telling you, they do respond.
There are two good questions in the chat here, one from Margaret Steinbugler, Margaret. Can you summarize some of the points in how to talk to your neighbors about their?
Well, I'll tell you what, don't do what I did, which was I got really angry and I was banging on my neighbor's door. Don't do that. But what might work is ask your neighbor to come over to your house and look back at their house. They didn't put that light up. An electrician did it, and then he left town. So you could point out to them, and then on my website, thedarkskysociety.org, I have a handout, how to talk to your neighbor with a bad light. but inviting them over to look back at their own house, explaining to them that it doesn't provide security, and that and if they leave, a lot of people on the East End, go back to the city. You could explain to them that you would be more inclined to call the police if you saw that a light was on when they weren't there, if they saw a flashlight or something like that. So dispelling, the fear of the dark, is important. And so that's kind of how I would start to approach it. It does help to have the carrot and the stick. It helps when you say, your light is, could you change your light? Could you shut it off? I've got a house right behind me that just now installed an illegal light. So if you say to them, your light's not legal, that helps. So finding out what your law is important.
All right, and Robin Simmons asked, what is the status of dark sky legislation in the town of Southold regarding residential properties or in Suffolk County? Anything?
Well, I know that Heather Lanza, your planning director, does review lighting plans before they're installed. So I think being supportive of, and also there's no reason why you can't go in and take a look at, if you know a commercial development is coming. As citizens, we're entitled to go in and take a look at the lighting plan. You want to make sure that they're using fully shielded fixtures that meet that definition, a dark sky light fixture, and that the lights are going to be shut off when the business is closed. What lighting controls do they have? Those are some of the things you can do as a citizen. You're entitled.
Okay, Margaret DeCruz is asking, any studies on the impact of car headlights? How much light pollution is caused by them? And how can we get rid of the newest ones? Are they full of blue light?
How can you get rid of what kind of lights?
The newest ones, car lights, car headlights.
Oh. Well, unfortunately, that has to be a national regulation. That's not something that has to be done on a federal level. So I don't know what to tell you about those horrible headlights. I mean, I think they're very dangerous, and people are putting up more. Those are those LEDs that are very high in Kelvin. So I'm sorry. I don't know what to do about that. I just keep hoping that the highway safety people will have something to say about it.
And Nancy Reinertson just said, thanks for this important presentation. As for talking to neighbors, thanks for the tips.
Yeah, well, let me know, tell me, I like hearing stories about success. And if you get frustrated, you can get in touch with me. Peggy's got my email. And, I really do appreciate that you all are being careful with the birds. I am working with the New York City Audubon. They've got a couple of laws that they're working on, and primarily to shut off building lights. They do shut off a lot of lights in the city. They say the city never sleeps, but the people do. And they shut off, those necklace lights that are on the bridges, those decorative things. They shut those off in the middle of the night. The Empire State Building shuts off its lights in the middle of the night. So there's some progress being made. But, we win some, you lose some.
Oh, wait, looks like we have another message. Oh, Margaret DeCruz has a success story. Margaret, you want to share it?
Yeah. So I had a neighbor who had a huge, bright floodlight on his garage behind his building, and his whole house was lit up. And I had put a dark sky thing in his mailbox, I think twice, but nothing happened. So finally I said to him, did you know that your light shines into your neighbor's windows and mine. And he came over and he looked and we talked briefly about the effect and he turned them all off that night. It was
Yay!
unbelievable, really. And so there you go.
Oh, that's fabulous.
I know. I've tried it with my other neighbors. I put the thing in their mailbox and
Yeah.
one night they turned all their lights off, but they haven't done it again. So I'm, yeah,
Well-
you got to talk to these people though. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Well-
I had a similar situation with my next door neighbor where they're never here, but they had this security light that was aimed out toward the street in such a way that anytime a car drove by,
Yep.
so I just simply texted them and, and talked to the builder too, and just said, listen, you just have to change the angle of this thing. And
Yeah. Well, let's try not to use these two words together, security lighting. Let's not talk, let's get that out of our vocabulary. It's nonsense. It's I call it insecurity lighting. It's very common. There's something that I would love to be able to work on, and I don't seem to be getting anywhere. The vast majority of our street lights are not performing a useful function. Street lights should be used only where you've got a mingling of cars and pedestrians. And you've got cars that are parked alongside the road, and you've got restaurants and etc. But we have these street lights that are on these rural roads where there's no pedestrians. Cars have headlights. There's no obstructions to speak of. So that's something that really bugs me. A lot of the streetlights were put in by the Long Island Larceny Company, Lilco, when they were extending the electrical service. Because, like when they would set up a new neighborhood, they would then put in all these streetlights on the utility poles, and then the municipality, our taxes, would pay them ad infinitum. So that's how they recouped their costs of extending electrical lines rather than just collecting, from the electricity. Also, the Long Island Power Authority, now with the PSEG, they're putting in utility pole floodlights with high Kelvin LEDs. And by law, we're trying to get them to take them out, but they're fighting it just tooth and nail.
wow.
Yeah, I know. it's horrible. They're stupidest. It is the most evil means of lighting a property you could possibly think of. Sticking a big unshielded light fixture on a utility pole, aiming it vaguely in the direction of somebody's commercial property. So I know that Heather Lanza, I know they the Southold would love to get rid of that stuff. It's just stupid. I don't know how else to put it. I've been trying to work on that for, 15 years. But, it's nice to know you all care.
Well, like you say, a lot of it is just education.
Yes.
So this is
Some people can't be educated, but mostly people can. And they're just not aware. There was no rhyme or reason for why poor lighting was installed in the first place. But we have to have, rhyme and reason to make the changes. And that's fine, because we know we have it. We have ammunition. Look, the fact that the International Dark Sky Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society came together to put together those 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting, that's huge. That's huge, because those are the 2 main groups that are teaching about, better lighting.
Margaret's asking if you go into schools with your presentation.
Pardon me?
Margaret is asking if you go into schools with your presentation and present them to schools.
Oh, yeah, I think, by all means, I'm happy to share my slides with anybody, anytime.
Well, thank you very much, Susan. This was
You're
really,
very welcome. I hope you all have a good night, and, stay in touch. Let me know what's going on.
okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
I